people need to realize that it will never be as slow as today. And so a big part of winning in the future will be an adaptable operating model that allows you to learn fast and keep up with change.
That's McKinsey Senior Partner Tanguy Catlin. Everyone is targeting better productivity through AI, but if every company has access to the same AI tools, where will the competitive advantage come from? McKinsey research suggests executives must look beyond efficiency and focus more on product and service innovation. Tanguy joins us to get into it. This is the McKinsey Podcast, where we help you make sense out of the world's toughest business challenges. I'm Roberta Fusaro, your host for today. Tanguy, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
It's a pleasure having me. Thank you.
In several recent McKinsey articles, Tanguy, you and your co-authors have been exploring what I call the second day story around AI, because despite all these massive investments in AI, most companies still aren't getting the biggest bang that they're intending to. Why do you think so many leaders still equate AI success with productivity when actually real value might lie somewhere else?
I think it's a very common question. Whenever we have seen the advent of what we call a general purpose technology, which is a technology that fundamentally affects the nature of competition in industries and redefine how work gets performed, the very first reflex from a leader is to try to extract efficiencies from that technology, which means doing the same work they were doing in the past better, faster, cheaper. That's the first reflex. Now, what happens though is because those technologies are ubiquitous, CEOs face the challenge that their competitors have access to the exact same technology and will pursue the exact same objective of capturing productivity gains and efficiencies, which then leads to the outcome that there is very little value in general that accrues to the company. Typically, a lot of the surplus is being passed to the customers or to some of the service providers that are being made necessary in the pursuit of the productivity. So I think it's just a natural instinct to say, I have a new technology, let me deploy it on top of my existing processes, rather than taking a pause and saying, how do I redesign what I do and what I offer to the customers? Now, when that happens, typically we unleash exceptional levels of value. So I suspect that AI similarly will unlock significant level of innovations. What it will be, I don't know yet.
A lot of industries are built on friction, right? For example, customers have to compare options and figure out which is best for them. But AI is taking away some of that friction, right? Information is more transparent. It's easier, quicker to access. How can companies capitalize on this new foundation?
The first thing to do is to take a step back and look at what customer wants and identify indeed what are those sources of frictions that either lower the experience or add unnecessary cost. And then presume that someone somewhere will use the technology to go and address those. And ask yourself the question as to whether you will benefit from it or not. And if the answer is not, you better be the disruptor.
One point that I found particularly interesting across these articles that you've developed recently is about thinking about AI and supply chains, right? How it lowers transaction coordination costs. What new business models do you think that could unlock?
It's a little bit difficult to project yet, but I'll give you some hypotheses. Right now, what we're observing, as an example, is the rise of what we describe as agentic commerce. And those platforms, take a ChatGPT, are new platform for the use of commerce. So I can go now and ask questions to AI as to what attributes should I look for in an insurance company that I want to buy a product for? What type of coverage are necessary? And if the technology has memory and context about me, it will be able to infer from prior conversations and customize to a level that was not available before recommendations to me. Furthermore, if now that platform is connected to product and service provider, I can use it to transact, not only to get access to information, but to now get a quote for my insurance, maybe buy it. Then you overlay on top of that we are now entering a world that is an agentic world where I'm going to create agents that can transact on my behalf. And I can go into a model where I can ask an agent on my behalf when my policy is up for renewal to go and independently look into the marketplace for what better product and services might be available to me and automatically switch. I think from the example that I gave you, you'll suspect that organizations will try to embed their product and services experience both into platforms or into broader offering to try to lock in customers and avoid the risk of them churning and moving away. I think that you will see industries come together into ecosystems because the friction cost to navigate across industries will be reduced.
So let's take another example, Tanguy. Let's talk about the process of buying a home, right? You have to find the house, you have to get a mortgage, you have to schedule an inspection, got to connect the utilities, and so on and so forth. How could AI affect the future of home buying?
That's all one experience, 5 or 6 different industries. Well, I think that friction cost will be removed. And I think that business models that allow me to have a unified experience with one service provider that orchestrates across will probably emerge. The second thing that I think will emerge is the fact that the technology we are discussing here is going to unlock significant level of productivity. And our society, particularly in mature economies, really need productivity gains because the population is aging. What happens when you gain significant level of productivity typically is that it drives consumption. And consumption in turns create jobs, which is a good thing. Now, the economic surplus means that the consumer with that economic surplus don't want to buy more potatoes and more poultry. They want to consume something different called entertainment, called healthcare and wellness, etc. There will be the rise of sector that provides surplus to consumers that will be in greater demand given the great gains in productivity and the wealth that will be associated with it that consumer will be able to benefit from.
It's amazing, Tanguy. You're talking about a brand new world, right? For companies, it's greater efficiency, partnerships, profit opportunities, and more creativity and innovation. So if AI models are becoming increasingly accessible, then what actually differentiates companies? Say 5 years from now, will it be data distribution, customer relationships, or something else entirely?
All of the above, probably, but you are correct that the fact that the value creation for the enterprise is going to lie from innovation, product services, business model innovation more than productivity. The second point that we are addressing now is the fact that the sources of competitive advantage will be affected by this technology, by AI. As an example, probably an important one, what AI provides you is access to predictions at a really, really low cost. And so we're going to use predictions for everything because the cost of this will be extremely low. To make predictions, you need quality data. So if the cost of prediction is cheap, the value of quality data will go up significantly. So one of the sources of competitive advantage for companies will be any proprietary data and context that they can keep for themselves. The second is when you're bombarded with predictions, you're going to need to apply judgments to choose among the options or to put the right value behind outcomes associated with those predictions. And so there will be significant value for the portion of the labor force that is trained and demonstrate the skill set associated with judgment. I think data is one of the source of competitive advantage that will be of greater value in the future. I think another one we discussed earlier is whether you can embed your product and services into the habits of your customer. A third one, I think, to go to your question as to what I think will differentiate the winner from the losers, it will be the metabolic rate of learning and the ability to create a self-reinforcing systems where you leverage technology that allows you to experiment better. The experiment gets you greater insight as to what allows you to win. Therefore, you have a better offering that you can enhance through technology for testing. And I do think that it is a good insight into what we differentiate winners from losers in a world where right now we're overwhelmed by the pace of change. People need to realize that it will never be as slow as today. And so a big part of winning in the future will be an adaptable operating model that allows you to learn fast and keep up with change.
For companies, organizations that want to be that fast learner, how could they think about organizing differently to become the fastest learner?
You're going to task agents with achieving certain outcomes, which means that you're pivoting from a knowledge-based organization to an outcome-based organization. To deliver those outcomes, you're going to need to bring together human labor and agents or skills that work together. You will automate a number of the low entry level tasks and activities. And so you'll provide probably more value with the people who have the capacity to oversee the system. So the shape of the labor force will change. So flat and horizontal towards outcome, different mix of talent in the organization. How do you get there? Well, today, the single largest, most important challenge to the adoption of the technology that we've discussed is the change management, is the upskilling of the workforce. It turns out that if you provide employees access to the tools and you don't train them on the use of the tools, the outcomes are worsened. So there is a massive upskilling of the workforce that is necessary to be able to evolve. And then, as I said, there is a set of skill set that leaders who need to demonstrate a growth orientation, a certain level of humility, a set of incentives and systems that reward experimentation rather than punish failure. That will be critical for organizations to be able to make that pivot.
Tanguy, you've talked about how CEOs need to simultaneously manage a strategy lens, a technology lens, and a people lens. And we've talked a little bit about some of what's required for the organization to prepare itself for AI success. Which of those three lenses is proving the hardest for leaders today, and why?
Or the organizational lens by far is the hard. But as I said, while not difficult, people are not knowledgeable enough about the fact that productivity is not the right strategy to pursue right now. You're going to need to pivot to differentiation. And then I don't think that people fully understand how AI is going to affect the value of different strategic sources of competitive advantage and modes. The system adaptation is a human challenge. I come back to all of the general purpose technologies that have been deployed, have taken years, if not decades, to be able to move from productivity or improvement you can measure at the micro individual level to the point you can see them at the P&L or at the societal level. And that is because it requires adaptation. Adaptation comes with a workforce that is confident in the value of pursuing the change, a workforce that has been upskilled to be able to pursue that change, and a set of management systems that are evolving to be congruent with the change that is required. That is by far the hardest.
I'm thinking, Tanguy, of that movie where they say, Soylent Green is people. AI is people. It's the hardest input to manage, right? So, Tanguy, if you were leading a company through an AI transformation, what metrics could you use to understand whether AI is creating long-term value versus just short-term productivity gains here or there?
I'll come back to a number of the metrics that are not changing. Can you measure whether you're gaining market shares? Can you measure whether you're extending your margins? Can you measure whether your customers are more satisfied with your offering? Do you measure that your employees feel excited about working for you, right? Those are eventually the metrics that do not change. What I think I would do, though, is I will be very explicit upfront. Maybe I should open a parenthesis. You cannot deploy AI everywhere in your organization at once. It's impossible. What you're going to need to define is where AI is going to create the most value. Focus on those areas. We've written a book about it called Rewired, where we say, find a domain and then do not deploy the technology on top of existing processes. Redesign those processes to capture the value from technology. and do it in such a way that will be scalable so that you can expand to other domains over time.
Which industries do you think are most vulnerable to that kind of disruption?
Which one is not?
Yeah, right.
Listen, you have two sides to AI. You have cognitive AI and you have what I would call robotics. So we've seen faster development in cognitive AI right now. And so I do think that industries that rely heavily on white collar will be exposed to significant changes in the short term. You can see professional services firm having to rethink how they're going to provide their service and price for it. In parallel, we see continued development in robotics, and that's going to affect maybe more blue collar industries. You can see the rise of robot taxis having impact on the transportation industry. The healthcare space will have more challenges evolving, even though at the same time, the way we can pursue R&D in pharma right now is being transformed by AI, and I hope one day will lead to the development of a cure to cancer. So it's a great question. It's a complicated one to answer because I suspect most industries will be affected one way or another. I think the primary axis that I would pose is whether it's cognitive AI or robotics AI that will drive different level of disruption. And then I come back to what we said earlier. In those industries, is there a lot of unnecessary friction that can be taken away? Number one. And or we'll have the derivative of AI being unbelievable innovation, like I said, refrigeration for electricity that would unlock part of sectors that we don't even think about today.
So now what about individual jobs? How could those be affected by AI?
At the micro level, right now, about 53% of activities performed by workers could be automated if we were able to use technology available today. So it's a pretty significant number. But the reality is that very few workers have the majority of their activities being those that can be automated. That leaves you with jobs where the activity is material enough that you want to explore how to capture the productivity from automations, but not large enough that I can just simply remove the job. And so there will be massive job reconfiguration associated with AI so that we can regroup activities in a way that I can extract them for productivity. In parallel to massive upskilling, because as I said, for those who remain, they need to be able to be augmented with the use of AI.
You've spent much of your career helping organizations transform through technology. As you look back at previous digital trends, what lesson do you think leaders need to most remember as they navigate AI?
I think that most people have been thinking about technology or innovation as a zero-sum game. And I do think that when you look at the evidence, is every new general purpose technology has actually significantly increased the size of market and value creation. And I think that's very, very important because many people are fearful of the impact that technology will have without actually recognizing that it could be a significant unlock. So to me, be thoughtful about the risk, but embrace the fact that it is a productivity tool that's going to significantly expand the size of many markets. The second lesson is as the market are expanding, typically what is happening is the value accrued to a smaller number of participants. We've been the rise of winner take all type of dynamics. And those winners are emerging very early in those disruptive moments. So place some bets, evolve the operating model to move fast, and make sure that you learn along the way so that you can pivot. And then the third one is I come back to this notion that people are obsessed with the technology. I think you should obsess with the people. Take a step back and try to figure out how you can move faster than you have before. And as you do that, very early on, think through the change management, the workforce transformation that will be necessary to go through that journey. That's what I've seen over and over again. I think will be even more important this time around.
Those are very wise words, Tanguy, and appreciate you joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, it was wonderful spending time with you. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks so much for listening to the McKinsey Podcast. I'm Lucia Rahili.
And I'm Roberta Fusaro.
Find us on McKinsey.com. We'll have a transcript of this episode up shortly.
And if you have any questions based on this episode, please email them to us at the McKinsey Podcast at McKinsey.com.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love for you to leave a rating and a review.
We'll see you next time.